say Takeshia Eads was the victim of domestic violence when she was shot and killed yesterday in West Orange County. The Orange County Sheriff's Office arresting her husband, 41-year-old Lamar Bryant, for her death. Channel 9's Sabrina Maggiore is live outside of the Orange County Jail where Bryant is being held. And Sabrina, Bryant is back in jail for the second time this month.
She was a beloved schoolteacher, a devoted mother to 4 children, a woman known for her quiet strength and radiant kindness, until one evening in late March, everything changed. In a modest home on the east side of Orlando, chaos exploded in the space of seconds. The sound of a single gunshot cut through the walls. The woman who held her family together lay on the floor, motionless. Her grandchildren stood just feet away, watching, crying, frozen. The man responsible? Her husband, the father of her children. A man she once trusted to build a life with, now standing over her with a gun in his hand. What led to this horrific moment wasn't some sudden outburst. It was a story years in the making. A slow buildup of tension, fear, and the crushing weight of a marriage that had turned into something dangerous. By the time Takeshia Renee Eads tried to break free, it was already too late. So why did he do it? What made him pull the trigger in front of the people they both loved most? And in a world full of resources, family, and support, why couldn't anyone stop it? Have you ever watched a relationship head toward disaster, knowing no one could stop what was coming? If you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from viewers around the world. Before the tragic night turned her into a symbol of loss and heartbreak, Takeshia Renee Eads was simply a woman who gave everything to the people she loved. Her life, though quiet and often overlooked by the wider world, was one of purpose, connection, and resilience. Born and raised in Florida, Takeshia grew up in a household that valued faith, family, and service. These values would become the cornerstones of her identity. From a young age, she was described as thoughtful and selfless, the kind of person who checked on others even when she needed support herself. She wasn't flashy, she didn't seek recognition. But those who knew her best say she had a presence that made you feel safe, seen, and supported. Her mother, Stacey Eads, often described her as the roots of the family, and for good reason. Takeshia kept everyone connected, grounded, and thriving. As she entered adulthood, Takeshia chose a path of purpose: education. She became a teacher in Orange County, Florida, pouring her heart into a profession that allowed her to shape young lives. For years, she served as a guiding light to countless students, many of whom faced challenges of their own. In her classroom, every child mattered. She wasn't the kind of teacher who just handed out assignments. She invested in her students emotionally. She stayed late to help struggling kids, brought school supplies for those who couldn't afford them, and became a second mother to many who needed more than just an education. Her colleagues often said she had the patience of a saint and a voice that could calm the most chaotic classroom. But even beyond the school walls, Takeshia's life was rich with meaning. She was a mother of 4 and a proud grandmother, titles she wore with deep pride. Her family was everything to her. Every soccer game, every dance recital, every milestone. She was there. She didn't just raise her children, she built a foundation for them, a home filled with warmth, laughter, and love. And when her grandchildren were born, that love only multiplied. She cherished every moment with them, reading bedtime stories, cooking their favorite meals, teaching them the little things that only a grandmother can. What made Takeshia so beloved wasn't just what she did, but how she made people feel. Whether you were a student, a colleague, a friend, or a family member, she had a way of lifting you up. She was the person people called when they needed advice, the one who checked in when no one else did. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't demand attention, but when she spoke, people listened. She was also fiercely loyal. Her sister-in-law, Brandy Benjamin, called her the glue that held the family together. Takeshia made sure birthdays were celebrated, family cookouts happened, and no one drifted too far apart. In a world where families often splinter under pressure, she was the quiet force keeping everyone close. But behind her soft demeanor was incredible strength. She had endured hardship in silence, not out of weakness, but out of a belief that protecting others mattered more than exposing her own pain. She was the kind of person who carried the weight of others without letting it show. That strength was one of the reasons she inspired so many people. She reminded everyone that kindness didn't mean weakness, and that real power could look like love, compassion, and consistency. Her death shook the Orlando community because people knew what they had lost. Vigils were held not just to mourn her, but to honor her. Former students shared stories of how she helped them through dark times. Parents thanked her for believing in their children when no one else did. Her colleagues spoke of the hole she left behind at the school, the empty desk, the silence where her laughter used to echo. The outpouring of grief wasn't just about tragedy, it was about impact. Takeshia wasn't famous. She didn't live a life in the spotlight, but she lived a life that mattered, deeply and intimately, to the people around her. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part of it all is this: she was trying to reclaim her peace, to move forward, to build a future free from fear. She had made the choice to step away from a marriage that no longer served her, an act of courage that many never get to make. And yet, despite all her strength, despite all the love she gave, she was taken. Takeshia Renee Eads met Lamar Bryant during a period in her life marked by ambition, hope, and a desire for partnership. She was building her future, working hard as a teacher, and raising her children with grace and care. Lamar entered her life not as a storm, but as a calm presence, someone who at first appeared to understand her values and share her goals. Their early connection was warm, even promising. Friends remember her speaking of Lamar with cautious optimism, describing him as supportive, attentive, and eager to be involved in her life and family. The two married in 2020. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but it was one built on mutual respect, or so it seemed in the beginning. They made a home in Orlando, where Takeshia's career flourished and she remained close to her family. Together, they painted a picture of stability, shared meals, blended routines, photos of holidays and birthdays that suggested unity. Takeshia continued to prioritize her children and work, and for a time, Lamar seemed to support that. But beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding. Those closest to Takeshia began noticing a shift, not in her, but in the way Lamar behaved. At first, it was subtle. He would call or text her constantly, sometimes under the guise of concern. He started showing up unexpectedly at her job or family gatherings. He questioned her when she stayed late at school or went out with friends. To outsiders, it could be mistaken for attentiveness. But to her inner circle, it became clear that Lamar was monitoring more than just her time. He was trying to manage her autonomy. Family members, especially her mother and sister-in-law, started picking up on his possessiveness. There was a tension that lingered in the air when he was around. Takeshia, ever the peacemaker, didn't complain outright. She wasn't someone who aired her personal life easily. But even in her silence, those closest to her could feel something was off. Lamar's behavior slowly escalated. He began to isolate her from loved ones, creating division under the radar. When she made plans without him, there was always a consequence, an argument, a guilt trip, or emotional withdrawal. At times, he'd accuse her of being secretive or unfaithful without cause. These accusations wore her down, not because they were true, but because they forced her to defend herself against the very person she was supposed to trust most. The emotional weight of his constant suspicion began to erode the relationship from the inside. Then came the instability. Erratic mood swings, aggressive outbursts, and controlling tendencies that became harder to conceal. He wasn't physically violent in the beginning, but the emotional toll was unmistakable. The dynamic shifted from partnership to control. Takeshia became quieter about her marriage, more private, more guarded. Her children noticed the tension too. Even if they didn't speak openly about it, children are perceptive. They see the way adults look at each other, hear what goes unsaid, and understand when love turns into fear. It wasn't long before Takeshia confided in a few close friends and family members. She admitted that Lamar had become unpredictable and that she felt like she was constantly walking on eggshells. But still, she stayed. Like many women in controlling relationships, she hoped things would improve. She believed in forgiveness, in patience, in trying to make things work for the sake of the family. But the situation worsened. Lamar's possessiveness turned into threats. He began to weaponize their history together, guilt-tripping her for trying to gain independence. Friends and family grew increasingly alarmed. Some urged her to leave. Others offered a place to stay. But leaving isn't always as easy as walking out the door, especially when you're afraid of what might happen if you do. Takeshia finally reached a breaking point. In early April 2024, she separated from Lamar. She was preparing for a fresh start, one rooted in safety and freedom. She had moved into a new place, taken steps to protect herself, and leaned on the support of her tight-knit family. But Lamar didn't take the separation well. Instead of accepting her decision, he became more volatile. He believed she was tearing the family apart, and in his mind, her independence was an act of betrayal. Friends later revealed that Lamar had started making veiled threats. He spoke about Takeshia in a way that was both angry and obsessive. Some brushed it off as post-breakup anger. But in hindsight, it was clear. He was losing control, and he couldn't accept it. He began showing up unannounced, at her job, at her mother's home, even at her church. He sent a flurry of texts and voicemails, some apologetic, others laced with threats. One day he'd beg her to reconsider. The next he'd lash out, accusing her of betrayal and claiming she was trying to destroy the family. His erratic swings between desperation and aggression were terrifying to witness and impossible to reason with. Takeshia, who was always calm under pressure, began to show subtle signs of distress. She didn't advertise her fear, but it was there. Her normally composed voice carried an edge of unease. Her smile felt thinner, more forced. And those who knew her best, her sister-in-law, her close friends, her grown children, noticed the weight she carried behind her brave face. Privately, she confided in those she trusted most. She shared that she no longer felt safe in her own home, that Lamar's behavior was growing more volatile, that he'd said things she couldn't unhear. Phrases like, "You'll regret this," or "You're nothing without me." Sometimes it was the words, sometimes it was the silence between them, thick, cold, and looming. Her family urged her to take steps to protect herself. Some suggested she stay elsewhere. Others begged her to press charges or file for a protective order. Takeshia listened, but she also knew how quickly things could spiral when someone was unstable. She didn't want to provoke him. She didn't want to expose her children to even more chaos. Still, she remained firm. The divorce was happening, with or without his consent. She had already moved into a new home in Orlando, determined to start a life where she could feel safe, supported, and at peace. She was reclaiming her independence, brick by brick, day by day. But even as she rebuilt, Lamar continued his campaign of intimidation. He hovered around the edges of her life like a shadow she couldn't shake. In early April, he drove by her house several times. He left voicemails, sometimes dozens in a single day. Her family began to fear that he wasn't just angry, he was obsessed. They noticed the shift from emotional manipulation to something darker, something more unstable. The tipping point came when Lamar, enraged by Takeshia's refusal to return to him, threatened to harm her in front of someone close to her. That moment turned fear into alarm. Takeshia was no longer dealing with a hurt ex. She was dealing with a man who had no intention of letting her leave on her terms. She didn't stop living. She kept going to work. She kept being a mother. But she started locking her doors tighter, glancing over her shoulder more often, taking different routes home. The life she was rebuilding came with the ever-present fear that Lamar might snap. And she wasn't wrong. In the days leading up to April 10th, Takeshia told her sister-in-law, "He's not right. I don't know what he's capable of anymore." Those words would haunt her family in the aftermath. Because on that fateful night, the fear she had lived with finally broke through the walls of her new home. Takeshia had done everything right. She'd gotten out, sought support, and tried to protect herself. But sometimes, leaving isn't enough. Sometimes, the person you're trying to get away from refuses to let you go. What would you do if someone refused to let you leave? Have you ever felt trapped in a relationship? Share your story. We read every comment. March 25th, 2025 was a Tuesday like any other in Orlando's Orlo Vista neighborhood. The sun cast its usual glow over the 5200 block of West Livingston Street, where children played and neighbors went about their routines. Inside one home, however, a storm was brewing, one that would shatter a family and send ripples through the community. Earlier that afternoon, Lamar Bryant, 41, picked up one of his daughters from school. Witnesses later recounted that he appeared intoxicated, slurring his words and acting erratically. Instead of heading straight home, Bryant made 2 stops, first at a liquor store where he purchased a bottle of alcohol and drank from it while driving, and then at a storage unit. His daughter, who accompanied him, told investigators that Bryant kept firearms and narcotics in the unit. Upon returning to the vehicle, he retrieved 2 handguns and placed them on the center console. Around 3:45 p.m., they arrived at the family home. Takeshia Eads, 42, stood outside. The couple exchanged words before entering the house together. Moments later, gunshots rang out. Inside, Takeshia's mother, Stacy Eads, and 2 of her grandchildren were present. Stacy, upon hearing the shots, immediately called 911, exclaiming, "My son-in-law shot my daughter." Deputies from the Orange County Sheriff's Office responded swiftly. They found Takeshia in the bathroom, suffering from a gunshot wound to the head. She was transported to a nearby hospital but was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The aftermath was chaotic and heart-wrenching. Family members and neighbors gathered outside the home, grappling with the shock of what had transpired. Takeshia's sister-in-law, Brandy Benjamin, described her as the roots of the family, emphasizing her role in keeping everyone connected. Takeshia was a mother of 4, a grandmother of 4, with another grandchild on the way, and a dedicated educator and church member. As we reflect on this tragedy, it's essential to remember the vibrant life Takeshia led and the void her absence leaves. Her story underscores the devastating consequences of domestic violence and the importance of seeking help when warning signs emerge. Following the brutal murder of Takeshia Eads, Lamar Bryant vanished from the scene, leaving behind a trail of confusion and fear. The chilling aftermath of the shooting only deepened the mystery surrounding the crime. For several hours after Takeshia's death, Bryant's whereabouts were unknown. He fled the house immediately after pulling the trigger, leaving his wife's lifeless body in front of their children and grandchildren. Law enforcement was quick to react. With only a brief description of Bryant's car and possible direction of travel, officers flooded the surrounding neighborhoods, canvassing for any signs of his whereabouts. Local news outlets broadcasted information about Bryant's alleged involvement, urging the public to stay alert. Within 24 hours, Bryant was captured in a small town outside of Orlando. He was located by the U.S. Marshals, who had been working with local law enforcement to track him down. Bryant had attempted to evade arrest, but his actions didn't go unnoticed. Several tips from concerned citizens led authorities straight to a motel where Bryant was hiding. Upon his arrest, Bryant appeared disheveled and incoherent, reportedly mumbling that he had nothing left to live for. At the time of his capture, he was in possession of another firearm, though he did not resist arrest. Just days after the murder, Bryant was arraigned on charges of first-degree murder. The courtroom was filled with a heavy sense of grief and disbelief. Takeshia's family members sat in the front row, their eyes swollen from hours of crying, their faces etched with the agony of loss. Bryant's family, who had been shocked by his actions, also appeared in the courtroom, but they maintained silence as the proceedings unfolded. During the arraignment, Bryant's defense team requested a bond hearing, but the judge denied bond, stating that Bryant posed a flight risk and was a danger to the community. The emotional tension in the courtroom was palpable. In an unexpected move, Bryant spoke briefly to the judge, his words barely audible as he muttered, "I didn't mean for this to happen." His defense attorney quickly intervened, advising him to remain silent. The community response to the tragic death of Takeshia was immediate and overwhelming. As news of her murder spread, her former students, fellow educators, and community members began to organize in her memory.
Tonight, a community is remembering a beloved teacher after she was shot and killed last night.
Police arrested her husband this morning. He's charged with murder. But today, News 6's Jarrell Baker speaking with people from her church about the light she shined on the community. Afternoon.
When her daughter called me, I was in the store shopping, and I would say Sam's had never heard a scream like they heard before.
The school where she had worked for over a decade, Pine Hills High School, was one of the first to hold a vigil. Students, teachers, and staff members gathered in the school's courtyard, lighting candles and reflecting on Takeshia's profound impact on their lives. One of her former students, now an adult, shared an emotional post on social media, writing, "Mrs. Eads changed my life. She always cared, even when the world seemed like it didn't. She was a light in so many of our lives." The local church, where Takeshia had been an active member, also held a memorial service. The congregation filled the pews as pastors and friends shared stories of Takeshia's kindness, her selfless dedication to her family, and her relentless pursuit of bettering her students' lives. The community was left to cope with the loss of a beloved educator, mother, and friend, but they also vowed to honor her legacy through acts of kindness and service. Takeshia's family, though devastated by her death, stood united in their grief. Her mother, Stacy, was especially vocal about the horrors of domestic violence, calling for others in abusive relationships to seek help before it's too late. She spoke at several vigils, urging the public to recognize the signs of control and manipulation in relationships. "I never thought it would come to this," Stacy said, wiping tears away as she addressed a crowd of supporters. "No one deserves to die this way." In the weeks following the murder, the public grief continued to grow. Local news outlets covered every step of the legal proceedings, while social media flooded with tributes to Takeshia.
Cordasia Page says she's felt the outpouring of love on social media for her mother, 42-year-old Takeshia Eads. One day after Eads was shot and killed, she's finding comfort in her mother's faith.
On her walk with God, she was bringing a lot of people with her, but this just happened, and it's, this might help somebody else.
A GoFundMe page was created by family members to help with funeral expenses and support Takeshia's children, and within days, it raised thousands of dollars. Her story became a symbol of the devastating impact of domestic violence, sparking conversations around the need for better resources and education on the issue. As the legal process continued, Lamar Bryant faced multiple charges, including first-degree murder, child endangerment, due to the presence of his children and grandchildren during the shooting, and unlawful possession of a firearm. His trial, which was expected to begin within months, would be the next chapter in the pursuit of justice for Takeshia and her family. However, for those who knew Takeshia, whether as a mother, a teacher, or a friend, the fight for justice had already begun. The ripple effect of her death was far-reaching. It prompted many to reflect on the hidden dangers in relationships that appeared normal on the outside, but were fraught with subtle abuse and manipulation. Takeshia's tragic end would serve as a haunting reminder of the importance of speaking out, supporting survivors, and taking action to prevent future tragedies. Takeshia's tragic death is a painful reminder of the dangers that often go unseen in relationships, especially the type of abuse that isn't immediately visible. Coercive control, psychological manipulation, and non-physical abuse are subtle forces that can suffocate a person's freedom, peace of mind, and ultimately, their life. In the case of Takeshia and Lamar Bryant, the warning signs of control were there for years, but they were overlooked by many, perhaps because they didn't fit the stereotype of what abuse should look like. Coercive control, a form of emotional and psychological abuse, is just as damaging, if not more so, than physical violence. It manifests in ways that are difficult to identify, especially from the outside looking in. Lamar's increasingly controlling behavior, showing up unannounced, refusing to sign divorce papers, and making threats, was an undeniable sign of his growing instability and need to dominate. This type of manipulation slowly eats away at a person's confidence, autonomy, and sense of self-worth. While it's easy to dismiss these behaviors as mere disagreements or marital issues, they are often precursors to more extreme violence. Unfortunately, this is where the system failed Takeshia. When she filed for divorce and attempted to break free, the legal system's response was slow and often insufficient. Restraining orders, while important, often don't provide the level of protection that victims need, especially when the abuser is intent on disregarding them. The process of divorce itself, often slow and emotionally taxing, can leave victims in a state of limbo, vulnerable to further abuse. Takeshia's efforts to seek help, to escape, were met with barriers that too often exist within our legal system. The question remains, how many victims like Takeshia are left exposed, trapped in relationships that they cannot escape because the legal and social systems are not equipped to protect them fully? The warning signs of Takeshia's situation were clear. Family and friends noticed the changes in her. They saw her fear and felt her hesitation when discussing Lamar. Her brave face masked the rising terror that consumed her as she tried to keep her family safe. But despite the visible signs of emotional distress, she did not have the support necessary to break free from a man who was becoming increasingly dangerous. The system, in this case, ignored the warning signs, signs that could have saved her life if only there was more attention, more action. For those in similar situations, safety planning is crucial. It's not enough to simply seek a restraining order or to hope for the best. Victims need to develop an emergency plan, identify safe spaces, and have access to resources like shelters, hotlines, and legal aid. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is a vital resource in these situations, offering support to victims who are facing abuse in any form. The hotline can be reached at 1-800-799-SAFE-7233, and trained advocates are available 24/7 to assist with safety planning, legal advice, and emotional support. But it's not just about the victims. We as a society need to recognize abuse in all its forms, not just the physical kind. It's time to shift the narrative from viewing abuse as something that happens only behind closed doors with bruises and broken bones to recognizing the silent killers. Emotional and psychological manipulation that can be just as lethal. Abusers often wield control in such a way that their victims become isolated, dependent, and unable to see a way out. In this context, Takeshia's bravery stands out. She fought for her children, for her family, and for her own freedom. She made the courageous decision to file for divorce and break away from an abusive relationship. But in the end, the system failed her. Takeshia's story is not just a cautionary tale. It's a wake-up call. We cannot bring her back, but we can ensure that her death wasn't in vain. We can fight like hell to prevent another story like hers. It starts with awareness, recognizing the signs of emotional and psychological abuse and taking them seriously. It means improving the legal system to protect victims more effectively and ensuring that they are not left vulnerable during critical moments of their lives. It means offering a greater sense of hope, security, and safety for those caught in cycles of abuse. Her children, students, and mother will remember her for her warmth, wisdom, and unyielding love. To her students, she wasn't just a teacher. She was a mentor, a guide, and a safe place in a world that often felt uncertain.